Hello, and welcome to CLEA'S World. I am Clea, and today I would like to share with you more information I've received from the 25th dimension during my last BQH session. I will be reading from a transcript, and when I refer to Lorrayne, I'm speaking to my practitioner who's asking me questions I prepared in advance of the session. And when I refer to me, I'm speaking of myself under hypnosis, which means that the answers are coming from the 25th. And before I move forward, I'd like to thank you, as always, for subscribing, liking, and commenting. I love reading all your comments. As you know, I respond to each one of them. I really love the community we've created in this space. All right, let's jump right in. Lorrayne. Countries like Denmark have said no more shots for people under 50. Why are some countries questioning more than others? Is the dark not as concentrated there, or are there more light workers there? Have the white hats had better success there? Me. So on the surface, yes, it's the white hats, meaning at 3D level, on the surface, behind the scenes, it's the white hats. So whoever they got to, wherever they were able to apply more force and more pressure. But really, behind the scenes is us. We are. What we're doing is we are spreading this everywhere. This is going to spread everywhere. In some cases, our energy trickles through faster because maybe they were more open. So yeah, it depends on who happens to be in charge. How many of the dark might have left from there? So maybe multiple reasons. It might depend on what type of laws they have, what type of relationship they have, what type of belief they have in certain entities, etc., etc. So yes, all those reasons. So there are 3D reasons, there are behind the scenes 3D reasons, and very much at the end of the day, we already said all of this is happening because of us. So it's going to show up in certain countries. It's Denmark, it could have been California, it could have been Australia, it could have been in Japan. It doesn't really matter. In fact, in Japan, we already know that they didn't even mandate these things. Less than 1% of the population took it. So that's what it means. It's just going to happen in different places, and it's happening. It's definitely happening. Even in the UK, it's happening. And you guys know that this is important for us to keep track of what's happening, because this is our focus right now. The ones of us who are left behind, who have chosen to stay behind, we are keeping our eye on the recall of this thing, not because this thing is the worst thing that's happened in the world. There's so much darkness, there's been so much darkness here, but because this is a signpost for us to know that we have learned now during this transition, we have learned to realize that we create our own reality, and we haven't wanted to know this. This is why we created a matrix, to forget that we do create our reality. But now, because we're going through a transitioning period and we're preparing to move on, especially those of us who are going to New Earth, we are going to have that conscious awareness. And so we're starting to come to wrap our minds and to come to grips with it, the fact that we do create our reality. So this is huge for us. And it's good to see on the ground that our intent focus is bearing fruit. And that's what's happening. Lorrayne. Okay. The US has removed all mandates of this thing on August 13th. Is this a recall, or is there something else we should be experiencing in that regard? Are we going to be told that there is no more emergency, so the EUA, which is the emergency use authorization, is removed? Or is it going to be a full condemnation of the thing, or a strong recommendation not to get it for anyone? Or will Pfizer recall the thing, and then the dominoes fall from there? I'm still trying to figure out what this is going to look like. What are we looking for? When will we feel like we're satisfied? This is what we wanted. Me. Yeah, so what's going to happen is, that was not the recall on the 13th. It was one of the main steps towards it, because really, if we're not encouraging people to get it, is there really an emergency left? You have to understand there are still these experimental things. The only reason they're being given out, whether there is a mandate or not, is because we're saying there is an emergency. But what emergency? Travel has reopened. There have been really no more cases. They don't even talk about it on television. Because on television now, since that failed, they're talking about climate change because they think this is an oldie but goodie. And they were laughing here. So let's go back to that one, since they can't come up with anything new. And so really, is there an emergency? And yes, what we're going to see is more of this, like an avalanche is going to. We already heard the CDC state that they were pressured into approving the thing because of the government pushing them. They're starting to do the, no, it was you, no, it was your fault, no, it was you. And eventually, yes, Pfizer is actually going to recall it. They're going to use as an excuse. They're not going to admit that they hid data and they were killing people, of course. They're going to say that they're going to wait until they've gone through the testing for 3 years or whatever it is. They're going to do it right. They're going to blame it on, they're going to say their technology comes from Moderna. They assumed that the research was done. You already seen Moderna sue Pfizer and BioNTech to say that they stole the technology. They shouldn't use it. So Pfizer is going to use that as an excuse to say it wasn't us. And they're going to say the CDC pressured us. And we were so concerned about this emergency because we're such good people that we did all of this. So yeah, it's going to be mayhem, but yes, it's going to come. It's going to eventually happen with the recall. And the reason they're going to recall it is because otherwise they're all going to jail, in their opinion, in a 3D way. They think we're just all going to end up in jail. I mean, people, and they're referring to their employees here. I mean, people are literally going to start refusing bribing people and say, you got to take it. People are already detaching themselves. There are doctors already detaching themselves. They're being called war criminals. It is not a joke. You think you're a doctor. You think you're so smart. You think that you're God. I mean, you are God, but not in the way that you are thinking of being God. And they were laughing here. And all of a sudden, people are calling you a war criminal. You can shield yourself as much as you want, but the tide has turned. It's not even that the tide is turning. The tide has turned because we are in charge now. We want to remind you of this. We are in charge. The light is on top. The light is making stuff happen. And guess what? It's not that we want this kind of revenge. We already said it's not that we want people to be war criminals or Nuremberg trials necessarily or anything tragic. But we are at the point where we're like, enough of this. This is wrong. And this is what's going to happen. So this is how it's going to be panning out. So we are waiting for a recall. Lorrayne, thank you. Okay, Claire asks, why did Mr. T, and I can't say the full name, but you guys probably know who I'm referring to. And for those of you who don't, I'm referring to the president previous to the present one, the US president that came before this one. So Mr. T. Why did Mr. T accelerate the program for these? Operation Warp Speed. We thought he had turned to the light by the time he was in office and was working with the white hats. So just as a recap, he is seen as a force for good, as if he's a person of the light. The 25th has already told us that he's not, the white hats are not on the side of the light. That's why they don't plan on, it was never their plan to remove the system altogether, but simply to improve it so it wouldn't be as dark, as corrupt. We are very grateful to the white hats. This is not to take anything away from what they have done. They have done lots of great things at a 3D level. However, we again assume that these people are on the side of the light. And so whenever they do something that is clearly not the light, a light thing to do or a good thing to do based on what we think of good and bad on this plane, then we say, oh, but it's because they had a roundabout goal they were trying to achieve. So unfortunately, they have to compromise sometimes. So I wanted to ask the 25th about this, because the excuse in the Intel community was that this warp speed, this Operation Warp Speed was put in place because they already knew that once the next guy was going to come in, they were going to do it anyway. So they might as well go ahead and do it to please people, which never made any sense to me. So I wanted to ask the 25th. So here's the answer from the 25th as to why this happened. Yeah, so we already said the white hats are in the middle. A lot of the white hats are ex-black hats. And we've also said that Mr. T also he's in the middle, but he was very much on the side of the dark, like a lot of the white hats who used to be black hats. In terms of if you're on the team of the dark, you're on the team of the dark. But we already said there are people in the middle that go back and forth. And some, they are very much keen towards one side or the other, but they do have the ability to move a little bit. And that's what's happened with Mr. T. That's what's happened with a lot of the white hats. So what they think, the way they justify to themselves doing what they did, and they very much push these things, is that, oh, if we don't push them, then we're going to be accused, we're going to lose power. Because again, the white hats think just like everybody else who's in power. It's like, how do we get power? You see, they don't work like us. They are not like workers. So for them to live, to achieve goals, strategic goals in this reality, they very often do very low vibrational stuff, very much stuff that you and I would consider dark and do consider dark. So yeah, this was a dark move that they did. They very much pushed it. I know that a lot of people in the Intel community try to say, oh no, but they were forced, etc., etc. We're always making excuses, right? We already said, we just finished saying it a minute ago, talking about Israel. And this was in my previous video, so please refer to that if you don't remember what they explained. So we just finished saying this a minute ago, that you cannot build light on a foundation of dark. You cannot. You cannot say, oh, we're going to do this dark thing, then we're going to fix it a little bit. It doesn't work. You cannot do that. And that's why we see the result of it. They could have pushed in the opposite direction. They could have done everything to undermine these things. They could have done everything to undermine, yeah, people are not really dying. These statistics are being manipulated. It's not true that there are so many people dying. This is not an emergency. Why didn't they? They have their own excuse for why they didn't do it. Could be, oh, we use this to see who's really evil. They know who's really evil. They know who behind the scenes has been doing all these things. Oh, we're going to do this because it really helps us if we put people on lockdown, because you've heard all of this. Claire's heard all of this in the Intel community. Or because if we put people on lockdown, we can go about our business of clearing stuff at night so nobody's out and about. Can you say bullshit? And they were laughing. And it cracks me up when the 25th uses these words, these kinds of words. It's hilarious. They really get into our 3D reality. So this is not, these are just excuses. What we were just saying earlier, you'll make 1,000 excuses if you're doing something wrong. They did something very, very dark, because here's the thing, the white hats are not above doing dark things. Many of them were on the side of the dark. Now, are they doing things with the same intent they had before, which was just to hurt, maim, and protect themselves? No, but they're doing it with similarly low vibe intent, which is, oh, we're going to get the upper hand. Oh, we're going to stay in power. Oh, we're going to give the people what most of the people want. Oh, this is how the power structure works. We've had the example of the chemtrails. They're still doing chemtrails. They think they're better metals that they're pushing around, but they're still metals, still chemtrails. The only reason the chemtrails are slowing down is because there's no more money, whether on the side of the white hats or the dark hats. Now, we are not saying the white hats are on the dark team, okay? We're not saying this. But we are saying this is not the first time they would realize they do a lot of things that are less than ideal from our perspective. This is why we're stepping in and we're making all of this go away and saying, no, we're going to stop all of it now. But this is also the reason why this will happen in a very non-dramatic way, because you're really going up against even people in the middle who very much think, are telling themselves they're doing good things. The white hats are convinced that they're doing good things, and they're saying, well, but we have to do this. Otherwise, the dark is going to do it. Just like with the chemtrails, or just like what's the example we had the other day. They were saying, oh, we're going to set up unriggable, we'll call it democratic competitions. I cannot say the actual word. So they're saying they're going to set up unriggable competitions. They can't even envision a world without governments because they're in government themselves. And the 25th was laughing. How would they envision a world without them? Do you think a doctor would envision a world without the medical industry? What is he going to do? Become a painter? This is what we're talking about. So again, we're not judging the white hats. They've done amazing, great things at a 3D level. We're not here trying to take anything away from what they've done. Any of the merit they deserve. But we are saying, we want to explain to you, we have been taught to idolize the white hats as if they are of the light. They are not of the light, which means they will use whatever strategy. They will do whatever it takes for them to achieve their purpose. Some people might justify just like they do, and say, well, then it was worth it if we got to show how bad this thing really is. So we get to recall it and maybe even question the other ones. Great. Somebody like you and me on the side of the light, we might have gone a completely different way and said, we don't want to see all this destruction. We don't want to see this at all. You see, it's a different way of thinking about things. Where do you put your intent? And that's what we're trying to say. So Mr. T very much was doing something that was not high vibration for sure, but yes, it was already on the side of the white hats. This was all strategized. Lorraine, thank you. Okay, the CDC, as you were saying, is already pointing fingers at everybody. Will the CDC blame Mr. Trump? And Lorraine's comment is, I believe they've already started. And what will be the outcome of this? Me. Yes, everybody's going to blame everybody. Absolutely. Everybody who's a public figure or has any blame to take, they will all blame each other. Yeah, Mr. T will say, well, no, because we truly believe we didn't have enough data and we truly believe people needed it. We know. They'll say stuff. And then they'll say, but we trusted the CDC to do their homework. We trusted that, you know what I mean? So the goal is to confuse us. And so nobody really falls, right? But of course, it's all a waste. It's all a waste of time. They would all fall. That's the problem that they know. They would all fall. You can point a finger, but you are part of the problem. So what happens if you, Lorrayne, ask Clea to kill somebody? Whose fault is it if the person dies and gets killed? Clea that killed him, or you that told Clea to kill the person? We're both at fault. We both participated. This is exactly what's going to happen. Well, if we stayed here, this is what would happen. The truth is, we're going to see the beginning of it. Again, it's going to culminate for us. It's going to culminate with a recall. And then hopefully we decide we're done here and we move on. And then we're laughing. But yeah, I mean, because again, the question starts coming up, which shows, okay, so Joe is saying that it's Bob's fault. Bob is saying that it's Jenny's fault. Jenny's saying it's Joe's fault. So I think all three are lying. All three are covering up for themselves. Means all three are evil and corrupt. This is literally what, this makes sense, right? Because everybody's going to think the CDC is saying it was Mr. T. Oh, well, yeah, that's a good point, though. He did push. Mr. T is saying it's the CDC. Well, yeah, that's a good point, because the CDC was supposed to check actually what happened there. The CDC is saying it's the pharmaceutical companies. Well, that's a good point, because pharmaceutical companies, aren't they supposed to be doing some testing? Oh, but the testing, they're saying they didn't have to do the testing because, you see the problem? Every time you are blaming, all you do is bring up another truth, another truth, another truth. And they think that by bringing up their truth, they're taking the focus away from themselves. But are they? Because the person now is putting the focus on them. And so all of a sudden, all parties to this look just as guilty. And therefore, everybody's going to pay for it. Now, again, not paying in a bad way. We're not going to get there. We don't want this. We don't want to have to replace. We don't want to have to think about what do we do if we don't have the CDC? Can we even survive without the CDC? We don't want to deal with that. It's boring. But it's going to come to the point where everybody's going to look awful. It's going to look very badly in public opinion. We're going to get there. Lorrayne, it is all getting very old and boring. Okay. And so I don't know if I can say this name. So I'm just going to tell you his first name was Anthony and his last name was, we'll just call him Frauci. And I'm pretty sure you guys know who I'm talking about. Basically, he was in charge of orchestrating, or he was the face of this entire pandemic orchestration. All right, so Anthony Fauci is resigning at the end of the year, supposedly accelerating his resignation. Is he preparing for the recall or just making his exit left so someone else can replace him? And will his replacement be just as evil? Me. So yes, he's making his exit left because he already knows what's happening. Because otherwise, what reason would he have to resign? He already said he was going to resign next year. What reason would he have to resign now? These are all stepping stones, right? Because they know what's happening. They know it before we even knew it, in the sense of they already know. They get all the data. They know what's happening, and they're watching it. They know what lawsuits are going on, even though we might not know about them. And they know worldwide, okay? We're not even aware of all that at a 3D level. So they know exactly what's happening. Why do you think the CDC would even come out and say, oh, the government made us do something? We're like, nobody accused of anything. Why are you saying this? This is weird. It's out of nowhere, right? Well, seems to be out of nowhere. but is it? They were laughing here. And so why fraud chi? Yes, fraud chi is gone. Now, fraud chi, the real fraud chi, has been gone for a long time. But the actor is being retired for this reason. Again, you know, on the news, they're saying he's just retiring, he's tired, he's made his money, it's fine. What are people seeing? Well, that's weird, he's pulling back. So does it matter who's coming in next? Of course, again, we want the system in place. So somebody who is clearly not going to be on the side of the light is going to come in. But at the same time, he won't have the opportunity to do the damage that fraud she has done, again, because we'll be gone long before that. And so could it be somebody a little better? Yes, of course. I mean, a lot of people are better than fraud chi. They were laughing. Or the original fraud chi. It's not hard to be better than him. It was really one of the darkest. But even if it is somebody else from the dark or somebody in the middle, very keen upon the dark, otherwise you would not be in that position, just to be clear, then you wouldn't. You just wouldn't be causing another one of these right away, if you want to put it that way. You wouldn't, because it's what we discussed about the new prime minister of Japan. He's not a person of the light, because again, otherwise you wouldn't be in that position. Even this person has done plenty of things to get there, okay? Otherwise you don't get there. But he's refusing to go along with the agenda right now with the excuse that the world is watching. The world is changing. Let's wait a little bit. Let's see how things pan out. It's going to be the same thing with fraud chi's successor. Not because he's a good person, we're laughing, by our standards, by what we consider good, but just because, again, the energy is changing. We are changing the setup for the things that are going to happen. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, as always, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.